Peter Bunting, what's today all about?
Well, today really is a seminar to inform people about the impact of welfare reform. So we have some people over here from England, Labour Party MP, Helen from Inclusion, who speak about disabilities and the impact on the welfare cuts and the welfare reform as it has impacted on the marginalised and the working poor in England, and where they've already implemented. And also is to engender and enthuse people to keep up their opposition against the implementation of the welfare cuts, which are really contradictory in many terms. We're trying to build an inclusive, equal society here in Northern Ireland, and the result of these particular cuts will devastate the working poor and the marginalised communities in Northern Ireland.
What's your sense of trade union labour groups within the north of Ireland being up for this fight?
Well, I think certainly in Northern Ireland they're up for the fight. The difficulty we may have in the future is that there may well be, and you can see it already, people, the old Tory idiom of divide and conquer, by saying we're going to threaten all these jobs and all these people will lose the jobs while we're supporting the marginalised and the working poor. But remember one thing, many of our members are of the working poor. They're the people who are going to be impacted as well.
Dave, what was your message to conference today?
Quite simply that what we've got here is a chance to try and halt this welfare reform, which has had such a devastating impact on the people in my community across the whole of the rest of the country. And I think that what we're seeing here is a very real chance to say no to something what is devastating the lives of ordinary people. It's making poor people pay for the mistakes of rich people, for governments and for bankers, and it's right and proper that we work together to try and stop this happening. It's certainly the case in my part of the world. We have seen a big increase in food banks. We taught in my locality about actually setting one up in our village. We didn't need to because it was easy to take people to local food banks rather than recreate one. But one of the things that came out and will stick in my mind the day I die was that one of the things that food banks do was, once providing basic foods, have what they call a luxury tray, and people are entitled to take one luxury item. The main thing people go for is toilet rolls. Do we really live in a world where the toilet rolls are luxury? It's ludicrous. Oppose these cuts. Do what you can, and I've got nothing but simply to an extent that they're faced with a very tough challenge. But that's what politicians go into politics for. Should stand up and say, we're not having this. We want a different world for all people. It didn't have to be this way. All the time I keep people saying, commentators, politicians saying, there's no choice. There is a choice. This government took a choice in 2010 to address, as they saw it, the austerity agenda by making people worse off. It didn't have to be that way. So I would say to politicians, gird your loins, get stuck in and get rid of these people. Let's get back some sense of what we should be really about, which is looking after people and creating a state, a welfare system we'll be proud of, which is where we all came from.
Well, I think the conference today went very well. I mean, the main thrust for the trade union movement is to build a campaign in opposition to the welfare cuts, primarily because we know the impact that it will have on working class communities, and we're trying to build that momentum, build a campaign across the unions, community activists and the political parties. And I think there has been a lot of effort put in by the media and the Tory party and other parties to create a divide between those in work and those out of work, in the main to say that these policies will affect people who don't want to work, when really that's not true. It will affect a really high percentage of people who are currently in work and will be affected because they have to subsidise their low wages through tax credits, and that's the big element of these myths and the demonisation of the unemployed, of the low paid, and that's what we're trying to dispel, some of these myths.
Well, experience of welfare reform in England, Scotland and Wales has been an unmitigated disaster for working class people. And I mean both unemployed, sick, disabled and those who are employed as well. But it's not just an attack on people who are claiming benefits, it's an attack on everybody, including the low paid. If you wanted to measure the impact, you'd measure it in terms of the rise in food banks, increase in inequality and marginalisation. You'd also measure it in terms of the suicides of people who have been had benefits stopped. It is a cruel regime, seeks to blame the poor, to say that the poor are poor because they've made a lifestyle choice. That, of course, is a nonsense. People want jobs, people want to have a decent life, but welfare reform is really about grinding people into the dust. It's about privatising public services, it's about cutting staff, and it's about the disintegration and destruction of the welfare state. I think, I fear that the impact in Northern Ireland, given the history in this part of the world, the social consequences are going to be even deeper, because welfare reform in the final analysis is about dividing people one from the other, and that is why the Tories have run with this narrative that the unemployed, the sick and the disabled are scroungers, when in actual fact people just want to live decent lives and should be given the help in which to do so.
You had a message also for the political parties in the 6 counties, and the ones in particular at the Assembly? Well,
it's the same message for those Westminster parties as well. If you're not prepared to represent the needs and the aspirations and deal with the grievances of ordinary working people, then step out the way. We're going to have to organise ourselves. I believe the trade unions have got a real role to play, but so have community organisations. If there's a mess, people need to set aside for their own good any divisions, whether those are the divisions that they try to use in the UK of race, etc., in this part of the world, sectarian divisions, because at the end of the day, the communities where you live in East Belfast or West Belfast, the reality is people are going to be driven into further poverty and despair if we let these people get away with what they're doing.
Ellen, what was your message to conference today?
That the impact of welfare reform on disabled people is absolutely devastating, and I do not think Northern Ireland should implement it. I wish that it hadn't been implemented in Britain. We fought very hard to stop it being implemented. Unfortunately, we didn't win that battle. But what I've seen, the impact of welfare reform is devastating. It's taking disabled people's rights back 30, 40 years. People are being left with literally nothing to live on. We're seeing such levels of destitution, people taking their own lives. I heard one statistics today that nationally on the railways we're now seeing 1 suicide per day. It's horrific. As I was saying in my presentation, not all of the aspects of welfare reform have managed to be implemented yet, and that's because the whole system is in chaos. It's an unmitigated disaster, but there have been aspects that have been implemented, like the bedroom tax, and what we've seen is real hardship and suffering caused by that. But there are so many different aspects to welfare reform. It's the same people being hit by cut after cut after cut. There's so many, I couldn't possibly have listed all the different aspects today. I mean, it's been quite a journey over the past couple of years. Disabled People Against Cuts, that I'm on the steering committee for, was formed in response to the attacks, deliberate targeting of disabled people for the most vicious cuts. And what we did is we didn't accept it. We've been on the streets, we've been fighting back, but importantly we haven't been doing it on our own. We know that this is part of a much wider ideological agenda, and part of the way that the government is trying to get it through is to divide people. So it's been very important that we've been united, and that is how we've managed to have some of the wins. We haven't won the war, we say, we've won the battles.
And finally, if you had one message for the politicians in the 6 counties, what would it be?
Don't implement welfare reform.
Well, I thought it was a very, very helpful conference to be held. It clearly shows there's widespread concern and anger about the proposed welfare cuts coming from London, and I think that the importance of today is that for the first time in quite a while now we've had a very wide range of people from broader society. Clearly this was an event organised by the trade unions. That's very much welcome, because they are seeing people themselves, including their own members, who are facing people who are on low income, people who are low paid, who are also going to fall prey to this cuts agenda. So I thought the unions this morning here were given a platform to a lot of people who are political representatives, community representatives, indeed MPs from Britain, for example, who are working at this on a day-to-day basis, who are actually seeing the implications of this cuts agenda from Westminster. So I thought today was a very important event, very informative, and it does show the depth of anger and concern there is out there in the broader community. Trade unions have over the last number of years been highlighting, and they've been doing some campaign around the cuts agenda in general. They have been highlighting the various problems as they see it. Clearly today's event, I think, again was very important, it's very timely, because we're all been badgered now that we have to accept the welfare cuts, with no choice, Armageddon is upon us. Our party's attitude, Sinn Féin, are very clear. We're against this austerity programme. We're not going to support these cuts being imposed on the people that we represent here. So I thought that the trade union meeting here this morning was very important. As I've said, it gave voice to a lot of people out there beyond party politicians that this welfare cuts programme is wrong and it needs to be opposed. So it's a broader voice than just a party. We have called for people across civic society to make it very clear that they're opposed to this kind of austerity programme, which is really cuts on vulnerable people. Certainly from our political work over the last number of years, we see day and daily people who are vulnerable, people who can't afford a house, people who can't get housed, people who are on very, very low income, people who are relying on some level of benefit, people who are working on zero contract hours, and all of the attendant problems around that, the uncertainty that creates for people, the kind of lack of hope it gives the young people. We have a very highly educated cadre of young people coming through the schools and the colleges, universities here. A lot of them are kind of forced to leave here, or certainly scramble around for a few jobs which are not really the type of jobs that they would have been aspiring to and are qualified for. So our party is very clearly of the view that we need to support those people. We need to invest in the community here, not by putting these austerity programmes which really suppresses an economy. Our job is to build a local economy here which gives people hope and prosperity. And you know, as I say, this cut is a real assault on people here, particularly those who are more vulnerable. And our party is going to stand very firmly against that. I do think that it requires all of us in society to work together, and I described it in this morning. We need a coalition against the coalition.